DJ Peterson, and welcome to The Journey is Real, where we talk to real people with real passions who share a real portion of their heart. Today, my guest is Paz Ellis, and we're going to be talking about her passion, which is the American dream. Thank you for coming on today, Paz.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
The American dream hits home with you on a lot of different levels. Would you mind taking a few minutes to explain to our listeners exactly why it hits you?
Well, my parents were immigrants. My father was Cuban, my mother Dominican, and they came to this country in the mid 60s because they were trying to get something better. They wanted to have a better opportunity at life than the countries that they came from. My dad in particular, since Cuba went into communism. So the American dream was a big thing in my house. My parents are proud to be, where they were from, but they were especially proud once they became citizens. It was a really big thing that they were Americans. My mom walked around saying, "I am an American," So,
How cute.
so yeah, that's my mom.
I've seen
And
swearing in. My husband is actually from South Africa. He was actually born in South Africa, so most of his family is South African. And when they talked about, their moments of the swearing in, it's like it just brings a tear to your eye.
yes. And what's really funny is that, well, especially right now with the way things are and what's going on in this country, so many people take for granted what so many people all over the world would die for, would give anything for. And we have freedoms that are put down by the Constitution that were laid out for us. And instead of being grateful, there's anger and there's all this stuff. And my parents, if they were alive today, I think they wouldn't stand it. They would be in tears, because this is a great country and we have so many things to be grateful for. And I think that the kids that are born here, that are raised here, maybe their own parents that were raised here, they're kind of indifferent to that. They don't even realize how lucky,
I
how
have like a
fortunate
sense
they
of
are.
entitlement and, I'm owed
Exactly.
this. And you know what, dude, if it's not in the Constitution, technically you're not owed it.
Exactly. So I mean, I feel that way. My parents felt that way. They didn't have a sense of entitlement at all. Um, when my dad got sick at one point, and obviously lost his job, and um, my parents didn't get any kind of financial help, any kind of anything. They didn't go after anything until things got really desperate, and then they weren't entitled to anything, and they were citizens. So, but they felt that they weren't entitled. They felt that with what they earned, this is what they needed. If they didn't earn it, it wasn't theirs to have. And I mean, that's how I was raised.
That's how I
So,
was raised too. So
yeah. And they struggle a lot to get here. Obviously, my mom, I don't think it was as difficult for my mom as it was for my dad, but they came legally and they went through all the hoops and all the stuff you have to go through to get here. And they fought hard, and they just contributed to society in a very positive way. And they passed that on to us, which I think
now,
is
what did that
important.
journey look like for them? Because I know you have a memoir out. And I know part of your memoir touches on that. What did
Yeah.
that look like from like their perspective of, getting here, to kind of put
Well,
people into the mindset who are listening as to, what that journey looked like?
right. Well, for my mom, it was a little different than my father. She had just lost her sister. Her sister was 22 years old, and my mom always suffered from depression. So she was brought here by her foster family, and basically to try to get her to go to college, to save her life, to give her a different outlook on life. And she was grieving the loss of her sister. So it was difficult for my mother. Well, as my father, he left Cuba before Castro, and then when he went back to visit, he said to his family, "Things are looking a little strange to me." And so um, he was definitely happier to be here than my mother. My mother just really didn't care where she was. Of course, then they met and they had a family and all that. But their struggle really began with assimilation, which having to learn a new language, getting used to customs, not wanting to let go of their customs.
Mhm.
And myself and my younger sister, and my older sister, we were their voice. I translated for them and interpreted and filled out paperwork and did things. I was just a little girl because they couldn't. So for a long time, I was their voice. I would go to the doctor or go to, let's say they needed passports because they were going to go visit their family. Well, my mother, because my father couldn't. Um, I was there doing translating, and I was like, little, but that was my duty, and it was expected of me. And as my parents, went on in the years, they learned English, and they weren't opposed to learning English. My dad didn't like it. We weren't allowed to speak English at home. We still did, Spanglish. We mixed up our languages like into one sentence. I would say, 5 words in Spanish and like 7 words in English.
Mhm.
My dad hated that, but that was my way, I think, of kind of rebelling, saying, "Hey, I'm an American and I want to speak English. All my friends at school speak English." But it was good, actually fantastic that my parents insisted that we learn Spanish and keep our Spanish
Mhm.
because it has helped me a lot.
English is actually harder to learn. I learned how to speak Spanish when I went and lived in a foreign country for a while. When I did it, it was actually harder for me to learn Spanish than it was for me to teach people English because
Yeah.
there's a lot more. You have to kind of learn Spanish by phrases.
Mhm.
Is the best way I learned how to do it, and watching movies and
Mhm.
kind of doing it that way. But it was not easy. And when you're jumping in both feet and you're now in a country where you don't speak the language, it is not an easy task. And if
I
you have
know.
children's like your parents did too, your parents had children, I can't imagine how frustrating that would be, talking medical, talking any type of help or
Yeah.
any type of, trying to get your paperwork in order. I cannot imagine how frustrating that was.
It was. I mean, I felt sorry for them, but I was also a little kid and I was embarrassed and frustrated and all that. But I did it because I had to do it. And my younger sister got to do it as well. She's almost 4 years younger than me. But it was our job, and our parents eventually did learn. My dad was a little more resistant. He would talk through his teeth because it was almost like it was bitter for him to speak English. I don't know why, but they were well read. They read a lot. They studied a lot. My dad did correspondence courses. He back then, like in the back of magazines, it would be like, well, you could send away and take a course. Now we
Mhm.
have the internet. But he couldn't go to university because, well, he works in a factory. But he always educated himself. He was always taking different courses and just continually improving himself, which was really neat because he was he naturally had this. When he came here, it was this instant thing. Okay, I'm going to better myself, and he would take classes online. I remember him sitting at the table at late at night when I was going to bed, and he would be studying, and he has to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to the factory and be there at 5:30. And I always admired that. I remember being really small, and my dad was doing that, and my mother would, how are you doing this? How are you doing all this? And he's like, because I can,
Mhm.
because here I can do anything.
Mhm.
And it was great that he felt that way.
And it
Never
probably
changed.
instilled in you a really good solid work ethic of, you want it, you work for it, you'll get it.
Yes, they were very hard workers. Unfortunately, they were stuck working in factories. I mean, my father could have, if he would have gone to college, he probably would have been an engineer or maybe gone on and worked for NASA because he loved astronomy. That was his thing. But he worked in a factory and he was afraid to take chances. And let's say he had several opportunities to like get involved and buy a business, and he
Mhm.
wouldn't do it because he thought, if something goes wrong, how am I going to feed these kids and my wife?
Mhm.
So he was not a risk taker. So I learned from that. I'm going to do whatever I want to do. Anybody thinks I'm crazy? A lot of times my mom or my sister were like, "Are you nuts?" And even now they're like, "You doing it? Like everything you say you're going to do, you do. Why?" It's like, because why not? I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. If I died tomorrow and I didn't try, then what kind of legacy, what kind of example am I setting for my kids?
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
that is,
I'm an Irish Texan, and The worst thing that grates my nerves is when someone says, "You can't do that." And I just look at them and go, "Watch me."
Yeah, you sound like my husband. He's part Irish, and yes, he's the same way. And
It's like,
actually,
just tell me I can't do it and watch me do it.
I found out that I'm part Irish too. I've got like 4% or something, but it's there.
That's okay. You hold on to that. Be proud of that 4%.
It's really weird. So, but yeah, I mean, their issues, what became my issues, but it was, but that is the great thing about this country is that you can come here with nothing and be something if you want. If you don't want to do anything, then that's up to you. But they
The
taught us.
opportunity is here and you have the freedom to do so.
Absolutely, absolutely. They were very patriotic. I'll never forget the day they came home with their we had gotten home from school. We got home from school before they did from getting their citizenship. And they do it like in a big like an arena or some big convention thing because we lived in New Jersey. So there was a lot of people, at the same time getting their citizenship. And they walked in with their certificates. And my mother was like, "I am now an American." And she was just like so proud of that. Like,
Aw.
like all the work that went into it. And the fact that two people that were not born here, that did not grow up here, that came here in their 20s for my dad, for my mom in 30s for my dad, he was about 30. They knew the Bill of Rights, they knew the Constitution, they knew all the presidents, all the vice presidents, they knew everything. They knew how many um, representatives there are. We don't know, not, I say we as a generalization, but most people do not know those numbers
Mm-hmm.
and do not know what our rights are, and they are rights. And so there's a difference between what is a right and what is a privilege. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, voting is a right." No, it's not a right. It's not in the Constitution as a right. And my parents knew these things, and they were so proud of that. And our kids go through the system, and they're clueless. They want to rewrite history, and I don't know. I learned that from
I
my
cringe
parents.
when people say, "This is a democracy." And I'm like, no,
Yeah,
actually,
it's a
it's not a
republic.
democracy. It's a constitutional republic. There's a
That's
huge
correct.
difference.
Yes, there is. And but I mean, there you're gonna get into politics, but
Or I probably should steer clear of that one.
yeah, but no, that you're right. You're absolutely right. Most people do not know the difference, and there is a huge difference, but they can look it up and find out at their own. So maybe
Well,
one
that's
day.
part of the issue is that people don't want to put forth the effort to do it. But when you are a sworn-in citizen, in other words, you work to reach that point where you are sworn in and you become a citizen. You actually have to take a test and you have to learn all that stuff.
Yes, you
And this is
do.
stuff we were supposed to learn in like social studies growing up, and half the people don't. And even now, I was a youth leader for 18 years, and in the last probably 5 to 10 years,
Hmm.
it's gotten worse, or people don't understand the basic social structure of the government. And I'm like, how can you
Right.
not know this? Geography, they don't know geography. I'm like, how can you not know this stuff? The capitals. I'm like, what are they not? What are they teaching you?
I know. I know it's crazy. When I was in college, I think it was my second year. I had like this. I loved geography, and I was a history major. So of course, geography kind of went with it. And when it was a graduate geography class, and the the professor, I remember he went up to the front of the class and he pointed to this little island, and he said, "I'll give $10." And I mean, there was like maybe 15, 16 kids in the class. "I'll give you $10. You can tell me what the name of this island is." And I looked around and I knew the answer. And I was like, because I hate to be the center of attention. I know I'm on a podcast, but no, I don't like it. But I was like, and so I said Madagascar.
Mhm.
And he's like, "Yes." "Anybody else here?" "Oh, well, I thought that maybe it might be, or, whatever," but they had no clue. Some of them had never heard of it. I knew that I was a kid because my mom was really big into geography and I love geography. And so, I'm always looking at the globe or reading about different countries. And I was surprised that no one, graduate level course, knew where Madagascar was. I mean, it's an island. So you'd think it would stand out from the rest of Africa because
Right.
you can get confused with all the countries out in Africa, but that island there, whatever. So that's when I started to realize, wow, a lot of these guys, these kids, they get to college and they don't. How do they pass an SAT? How do they do that? How do they get here?
Well, they don't even know a lot of like history. When I went to school, I went to be a history teacher, actually, strangely, oddly enough.
Hmm.
And I love history. History fascinates me, whether it's good history or bad history.
Right,
Because, I've always remembered that phrase, those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. So when they're pulling down statues of Confederate soldiers and saying that this flag stands for this, and they're absolutely wrong about what it actually stands for,
right,
or they believed in this, therefore we're gonna, oust them out. And I'm just like,
yeah,
when's the last time you picked up a history book, a real history book, like
yeah,
from pre 1950 history book?
right.
Almost how far back you have to go because it's been whitewashed
Hmm.
up to a
Yeah,
certain point, and it's like now they're saying that supposedly the Holocaust isn't in the history books anymore. I don't know if that's true or not, but I thought, you've got to be kidding me. You have to study that stuff, or you have to study the path that he took so you can recognize it coming again and it
right,
doesn't get repeated. And
right.
people don't understand that, the importance of history, the importance of working for what you want, the importance. I mean, I could go on for hours on that myself, but back to the American dream. of people have faced that type of stuff. Those from the Holocaust have come to America, and I mean, they must be floored when someone says, well, that didn't happen. That's history,
Yes.
and
And
they need
people
to
forget
study
it.
that stuff, and they need to understand where people are coming from, like your dad from Cuba. People might not understand who Castro was.
Right.
That stuff, you gotta study that stuff and understand where they came from.
Right. One thing I had somebody criticize me for this because I mentioned it in my book and I talked about Che Guevara, which was he was a guerrilla, like revolutionary guerrilla warfare guy, long hair. You've seen him on T-shirts and backpacks, you
Hmm.
know, and young kids, I don't know, teenagers, people in the 20s wear it, like wore the shirt with his face on it. I'm like, do you have any idea who that is? And I mentioned that in the book, like offhand, like I would never wear a shirt like that because my father would have been like completely distraught
Hmm.
because they don't know what Che Guevara did.
Hmm.
He he murdered people, women, men, children,
Hmm.
firing squads. Okay, that's how they took over. So he's not a hero. You might think he looks cool on your T-shirt, but he's not a hero. And if you, someone said to me, well, because there was a discussion based on somebody didn't like something in my book and so reviewed about it and said I didn't like that she made these generalizations. And I said, those were my facts because that was my life and that was my, what I lived and my father lived. So telling me that Castro was good for Cuba and that he had so much compassion and that he's actually tried for the US to be lenient on Venezuela and like all this stuff. I was like, you have no idea. You're looking at it because you have a political agenda and you're not looking at the facts. You don't know what the truth is. You haven't been there. You don't know. You don't know that. Let's say you have a cousin and your cousin needs to have something simple like her gallbladder removed, right?
Hmm.
Well, she can't get her gallbladder out until you send a light bulb in for the surgery or in gloves for the surgeon. So that is the state of medicine for the people in Cuba. If
Hmm.
you When you see those nice fancy hospitals in movies like James Bond movies or whatever, that's just for the elite. That's not for the people. So, things like that in my book, I mention and some people get upset with that. But that is the reality. That is how my family had to live. I have friends and other Cubans that I know that their families live in small towns. My family lives in a farm. They were tobacco growers. And of course, they took all that away from them and just gave them like 2 acres of land or something.
Hmm.
But the people that live in the towns, they get like a little bag of beans about like this big for the month for like a family of four.
So, like, what, about a pound or two?
It's not even a pound. It's like itty bitty. like half of a, like if you buy a big bag of beans, like,
Okay.
you like maybe it's like half of that is for the family for the month. Like that's not equal. It's whatever.
Yeah, and people don't
Anyway,
understand what it's like to not have food. They don't understand, counting money to go get one piece of chicken to boil in water to make chicken soup.
yeah. Well, there they, money doesn't matter. But it's what's really funny is that when my grandparents, and this I remember, and I talk about it in the book, it was funny, but it was heartbreaking. We went to the grocery shopping. My grandparents finally came from Cuba. My father hadn't seen his family in 23 years. So he finally got his parents to come, and we went to the supermarket in New Jersey. The supermarket that is really popular is called Pathmark. So we went to Pathmark, and my mom is grabbing groceries and filling up the grocery cart. And my grandmother is like looking around, and my grandfather stopped my dad. And I remember like watching them, and he's like, Rolando, what are you doing? And he's looking around. He's like, aren't you going to get in trouble? And my
Oh,
father says, Papa, he's like, we have money to pay for this food. It is available for sale. Because he's forgotten. He had forgotten. He was at the time in his 70s. It's been a long time. And he's like, you're not going to get arrested? He's like, aren't you taking more than you're supposed to? He's like, no. If I want to buy, 500 pounds of chicken and they have it, I can buy 500 pounds of chicken. And my grandmother started to cry. I remember my mother hugging her and telling her to calm down because she thought we were going to get arrested.
oh,
Yes. So that goes to show you, and that's happening right now in Venezuela. It's happening right now in a lot of countries who are turning to communism or socialism. People
hmm
don't know what they're asking for.
yeah.
When you lose your freedoms, and they come for your guns, and they come for your, um, well, let's just say, you're not headed in the right place, in the right
You
direction.
don't know what you're asking for at all.
No.
I know not quite along the same lines, but when my husband's family came from South Africa to here, people don't understand how much variety, how many options that we have here. We took them to Walmart and we closed their eyes, we covered their eyes, and we stood them in front of the Oreo section at Walmart. Okay, just the Oreo section. We uncovered their eyes. I thought they were going to fall over. They're like, there's so many different kinds, and then we're driving down the road and people have like their UTVs out in their front yard, just
Right.
standing there like, aren't they afraid they're going to get stolen? Like, we
Yeah.
can't leave anything out,
Yeah.
and that's, people don't understand the mindset unless you go outside of this country.
Exactly. Yeah, and go to the country, go into where the people live, not
Not in the tourist
not
area,
stay
not
in the
in the
resort.
resort, not in, no.
Yeah, don't go to Havana to the 10-block radius that they want you to stay in.
Mhm.
Go into the country, go into the little towns,
Yeah,
and that's
we went to the Dominican Republic a few years ago with friends
really
of ours, and we stayed in the resort.
right.
But we also went out on one of the excursions. One of the excursions actually took us through, because we had to pick up people from a couple of different other resorts
Hmm.
to go to where we were going. And where we were going was like almost kind of on the other side of the island. And we had to drive through those parts.
Hmm.
And they didn't stop. And they weren't planning on stopping either. But, we got to see it. And I'm like, until you see stuff like that, or until you go to like Mexico and see little kids that are supposed to be in school who are selling stuff on street corners just so they can get food that night. Food to them is eating a tortilla with tuna or
Right.
something. You don't fully understand and appreciate what you've got here in America. You don't understand and appreciate what the actual American dream looks like. You know,
Yeah.
people dream of, going to a store and picking out, you know, 500 pounds of chicken, or 6 different kinds of Oreos, or
Right.
you know they don't understand that there is one type of Oreo, if they have Oreos at
Yes,
all.
they have
There's
Oreos.
one bag of chips, there's rice, there's
Hmm.
beans, and you figure out 20 different ways to make rice and beans.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they don't understand that, and it does break my heart,
Yeah.
seeing kids that, I don't want to eat that, that's gross. And it's like, dude, seriously? You really don't understand. I mean, growing up, the joke was, people in third world countries would love to eat this stuff, but the truth is, people in third world countries would really love to eat this type of stuff.
Yeah,
And they
absolutely.
don't understand it, and it just until
Yeah.
you've been outside of the country, you don't get it.
No, and I remember when we were kids, my sister was really picky eater, and she didn't want to eat, and my mom would always say to her, there was like millions of kids starving in Africa. Or there's millions of kids
Mhm.
starving, whatever. And we were like, oh, mom and her African kids, like we were little, so we didn't know. But
Mhm.
then later, we grew up and you learn. And now knowing what I know, like with the family and Cuba and all that, it's just like I think in our own country, people don't realize how many poor people we have in our
Mhm.
own country. Well, I
Yep.
mean, I lived in Oklahoma for almost 20 years. That's where my husband was born and raised. And there's certain parts of there that you drive through there and you think you're in a third world country. Those trailer parks, I mean, it's really sad. These
Well, and
kids,
especially now as everyone's losing their jobs because
oh,
we
terrible.
were on lockdown for so long that it's like it's getting bad.
They're locking down Florida again, which is where I live right now. And it's
Texas
really scary.
stopped. Abbott said he's not following any more of the phases. He's locking those down for the moment until they figure it out. Houston's at 90 to 95% capacity in their ICUs.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, and that's going to affect the economy again, and everything's going to tank, and people are really going to get an understanding of what it's like. Some do because a lot of the oil field guys lost their
Yeah.
jobs.
Yes.
They lost that income, and
And I
it's
mean, they had already lost it years back, when the pipeline had stopped.
Mhm.
Because we were in the middle of the whole pipeline boom when Keystone was going through because we owned the business in Stillwater, Oklahoma. And we had a laundromat and we would see those guys come through. It was business was crazy for a while and then they shut it down
Mhm.
and that town just died. Another town basically boarded up because they were gone. So yeah, it's really sad how it affects in this town where we live right now in Florida. A lot of the restaurants didn't make it, are not coming back, even big ones, and it is frightening.
And Florida faces a lot of hurricanes, and this is what's taking them down. That's got to be frustrating.
Yeah, so I don't mean, I've only been here, we've been here 3 years now, I
Mhm.
think it's almost 3 years. And it's a little different because, my husband had never left Oklahoma and we lived on a cattle ranch and for some years before that we lived in town. But now moving here, it's different. You have to worry about different kind of storms. There it was tornadoes, here it's hurricanes.
Mhm.
And, people running to the store now. I think we're going to run out of toilet paper again. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So,
Um, so let's get back to where we were. Your journey, your American dream. We've talked about your parents, but we haven't really kind of hit on you. We've talked about you when you were a little kid. But what brought you from where you are to like now, where you have the memoir out along with a couple other books?
um, I always loved writing and
Mhm.
reading, and I was a big daydreamer, and I always got in trouble for it in school
Me
because
too.
I think
I think most authors do.
they're like, he's
That's
always
kind of
daydreaming.
everybody's past.
Oh my God. Like I remember getting spanked in my hand, like swatted, you know, like pay attention, you stop daydreaming. And so I was always daydreaming. And the best part was that I was so little, my parents yet didn't read English. So when I would bring my report card home or letter from the teacher, I got to read it.
Oh,
I
jeez, that's cheating.
yes, I get to make up my own story. I did really good, and they could see the S's, satisfactory, satisfactory. But the little note in the bottom, my mother go, "What does she say there?" Oh, she said that my handwriting's getting better, but that it's still bad because it was really bad. But I wouldn't say I was daydreaming because I would have gotten in big trouble. But I love to write. I've always loved to write. And what really did it for me, what really made me put myself out there, I mean, it was very raw. When I wrote the first edition of Plantains and the Seven Plagues, my mom had just passed away and it was kind of unexpected. She had been sick, but not sick enough to die.
Mhm.
I think there was kind of maybe some malpractice going on there or something. I'd rather not even delve into that. But it was bad, and I was not ready to lose my mom. I had already lost my dad almost 14 years before. I was so lost. I felt empty, soulless, abandoned, orphaned. I can't even describe what I felt. It was horrible. So I wrote my mom a letter describing how angry I was and how just I was I was beyond devastated. And I know a lot of people have lost their parents, and some haven't. Most a lot of people haven't. But the pain was so intense, and I was not grieving properly, that even my sons noticed. And they said, I heard them one day say to my husband, Dad, when's mom going to stop crying? When is she going to
Aw.
when is she going to want to go out of the house? It took me 9 months before I even saw my in-laws in Oklahoma. I wouldn't leave the house. It was bad. So I wrote her this letter, and the next day I grabbed my laptop and I just started writing. I wrote down the title because I knew what it was going to be. I knew I knew what the subtitle. I mean, I wrote it like, we were talking about before, and not doing outlines or anything like that. I knew like what it was, and
Mhm.
it was very raw. It wasn't. I
What does the title mean? Because it's an interesting title.
Okay. Plantains and the seven plagues. Plantains refers to the Dominican side of me. It's a
Okay.
very Dominican thing. The plantains, the different ways you can cook them, and I love plantains. And the seven plagues is because my dad was always coming up with these really sinister, macabre ways in his imagination of how God could strike down Castro with one of the seven plagues, or of the many others my father invented.
Mhm.
And this was a thing we did. Like, some things I can't even say out loud. It was just, he was so angry that he hoped and he hoped, and as luck would have it, Fidel Castro outlived my dad. And on Father's Day, I did a little. It wasn't a blog; it was the post that I put on Facebook, and I wrote something to my dad, and I said, "By the way, Dad, Castro finally died, but Cuba's still not free." And that's how I ended my Father's Day post. But that's where the name comes from. It's from like the Dominican, that, and then the Cuban, and then half Dominican, um, half Cuban, and full life, because even though I'm half this, half that, I'm an American, and I'm full of life. No matter all the horrible things that I went through with my parents being sick and myself having several autoimmune illnesses, I think I have a pretty good life.
Mhm.
And it took my mother dying. It was like a springboard for me to jump on and take off with what I have always loved. In a weird way, I almost feel like she gave me a gift,
Mhm.
left me something like, do this. And I could hear her telling me, don't stop, keep going. And so that's how um, that's been my journey. But and it's funny because I spoke to a podcaster recently, and he wrote yesterday. He's been reposting my our interview, and he said something about starting your journey in life at middle age. And I looked at it and I was like, middle age? Oh my God, I'm middle aged. It just like, it hadn't occurred to me that, so I was telling this girl earlier, I said, if I'm middle aged, that means that I will live to be 104, because I'm 52 now.
Mhm.
And I don't know, that's not such a bad deal. Let's see how many books I can write in the next 52 years.
Yeah, and I mean, you have a lot of passion to draw from. You have a lot of stories to draw from. You've got a couple different books out there. You said you're relaunching a couple. You've got a couple that are fiction along with the memoir. Could you tell us a little bit about those?
Well, Just Finn was one that I had published, and I took off the market, and I republished it now because I got a really good editor, and I wanted it to be done really, just right.
Yeah, I
And
did
Just
that with
Finn,
my first book, Strength from Within. It's kind of the same thing of pulling it
yeah.
up and redoing it and sending it back out.
I mean, when I published the first memoir, I just had to get it out. It was like a cathartic thing. Like, I had to get it out off my shoulders, out into the world. Even though I didn't do any publicity, I didn't do anything. I just published it. That's all I did. But then now, besides going through Amazon, I went through Ingram Spark, and I'm, doing stuff to promote it. But I can't go to any shows or any fairs because, you can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But anyway, Finn was inspired by my brother. He has Asperger's syndrome, and he found out a few years ago when he was about 45 years old. And he was so excited. He called me. He's like, "Oh my God, guess what?" And I'm thinking he won the lottery. He's like, "I just found out that I have Asperger's syndrome." I'm like, "Okay." He said,
Why is he excited?
"Because it explains why he was always so different, so weird. He had all these
Got it. There's
things."
a reason behind why
Now
that's
he
what he has.
understood, and it turns out that his firstborn also has Asperger.
Hmm.
My brother's very peculiar. I mean, he would do things like scrape off the cheese off the pizza and just eat the bread. He'll eat one thing. He'll drink 2-liter bottles of Coke or Pepsi or whatever brand he's chosen for the month in one day. He would do like really bizarre things. Um, Growing up, just things that most people look at and go, "Wow, that guy's really quirky," you know. And so I was inspired by him. And I one day I had been watching something on TV, and it was about a boy who is autistic and is on the spectrum, a little more severe, well, quite a bit more severe than my brother. But I just started writing um, some of the things that I remember my brother doing.
Hmm.
And then it just kind of took off from there. And now I have that one's done, and it's at the editor. It'll launch next month. And then the second part is not finished. So in the fall, I'll have that one published. I'm just not sure about the title yet. I'm mulling it around, but it's called Just Finn because Finn doesn't want to be called by his last name, by his father's last name, since he left at home. He has this thing about just being called Finn, just Finn. Like if you say Mr. McManus or Mr. whatever, he's like, "No, just Finn, just Finn." So that's where I got the title from, because it was like the sting with him, constant. But the second one is going to be different because he's more than that now.
Hmm.
He's learned and he's grown. So I'm thinking maybe something like book two or something simple, Finn book two. You
Something
know,
like that. So
yeah.
where can people find out more about you and about your books?
Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Um, I have a website. It's pazellis.com, Paz as in zebra, Ellis, Ellis. And on my website, there's links to my Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, uh, Twitter, everything. And then on my website, I also have a place where I blog,
Hmm.
and I have towards the back of it, there's like a media page where you could see like all my podcasts or radio shows that I've done. But I also have like a subscription page where you could sign up, and I send a newsletter out once a month, only once a month.
Yeah, I
And
do mine bi-weekly. I'm like, I don't want spam.
yeah, no, I hate that. So I only do it unless like I had a giveaway the other day. So there were select people that I actually had to go through the list and send them because I knew that they didn't have the book,
Mhm.
and I wanted them to have a chance to get a copy. So if I'm doing a giveaway, I might send an extra one, but it's once a month. The 8th of the month, I send out a newsletter and just let them know what's going on. Sometimes I'll have a link with another company where they can get it free through, like if they want a digital copy for free. But every now and then I throw giveaways on Facebook, my page, and I'll say, if you go to my website, sign up and come back here and say, I want a copy, and it's just kind of fun because then I get to talk to my fans. A lot of people don't do that, but I enjoy it,
Oh,
and then they write to me.
well,
So,
you have a few minutes left, like literally probably about two. Is there anything you'd like to add?
well, my message is, I mean, in this book, it was about love and family and grief. But my message is that life is really short, that you need to make the best of what you have. If you love someone, tell them you love them. Don't waste any time because you don't know what's going to happen. Realize how fortunate you are, to be where you are, to be who you are, and just love to the fullest. If you love someone, just tell them you love them because you don't know when you're going to lose your mom or your dad or your boyfriend or husband or girlfriend or whoever it is in your life, your dog. It doesn't matter. Life is short, And I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that we're not here forever, and we don't take any of the junk with us. So that's my final word.
Well, and for some of us born here in the United States, we take our freedoms for granted. We don't understand, what the true American dream looks like,
Hmm.
as somebody may from another country. And so I want to thank you so much for sharing that journey that your parents took as well as you, because you took part of that journey with them. You had to
Absolutely.
help them adjust to the American dream.
Yes.
And so I do thank you for sharing your heart and sharing your journey with us.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed your talk.
Thank you. And thank you guys for listening to The Journey is Real, where we talk to real people with real passions who share a real portion of their hearts. I'm CJ Peterson of cjpetersonwrites.com. Until next time.